Sarah Chen walked through the long metal hallways of Station Nexus. Her footsteps echoed in the empty corridors. The space station was huge, bigger than any city on Earth. It floated in the dark space between stars, serving as the center of galactic government for 3,000 years. But Sarah felt small here. Every day reminded her that humans were not welcome. She stopped at a large window that looked out into space. Thousands of ships moved around the station like busy insects, ships from hundreds of different alien species. Some looked like giant crystals that glowed with their own light. Others were smooth metal spheres that seemed to bend space around them. The Vardak warships looked like angry metal beasts with too many weapons. All of these species were considered better than humans. At least that's what the Galactic Council said. Sarah touched the communication device on her wrist. A small hologram appeared showing her assistant back on Earth. "Any news about the infrastructure proposal?" she asked. The young man on the hologram shook his head. "They rejected it again, Ambassador. Didn't even discuss it. The Zephyrian counselor said humans are still too primitive for major construction projects." Sarah closed her eyes. This was the 15th proposal they had rejected this year. Roads, hospitals, schools, water treatment plants. All things that could help billions of people across human colonies. All rejected because humans were labeled as Category 7 developing species. The categories went from 1 to 10. Category 1 species were considered the most advanced. They got the best trade deals, the most resources, and all the respect. Humans were stuck at Category 7, just barely above the level where they would have no rights at all. It didn't matter that human engineers had designed half the safety systems on this very station. It didn't matter that human doctors had created cures for diseases that killed other species. It didn't matter that human explorers had mapped more of the galaxy than anyone else. What mattered was that humans were young. Their species had only been in space for a few hundred years. The council members had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before humans even invented the wheel. Sarah made her way to the council chambers. The room was enormous, with seats arranged in circles that went up toward the ceiling. Each species sat in their assigned section based on their category. The higher categories sat closer to the center, where the most important decisions were made. Humans sat in the outer ring, so far from the center that they needed electronic screens to see what was happening. Today's meeting was about trade routes. The Tesseran Union wanted to expand their shipping lanes through human space. Normally this would be good news. More trade meant more jobs and more money for human colonies, but the council was discussing the proposal as if humans were not even in the room. The route through Sector 7 would be most efficient, said Councillor Veltar, a tall blue alien with 4 arms. The primitive species there should have no objection to our ships passing through. Sarah stood up. "Excuse me, Counselor. Those are human colonies in Sector 7. We should be part of this discussion." The chamber became quiet. Several alien delegates turned to look at her. Some seemed annoyed. Others looked curious. Councillor Veltar's large black eyes focused on Sarah. "Ambassador Chen, your species may observe these proceedings, but Category 7 species do not participate in major trade decisions. But it's our space," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice calm. "Our people live there. Our ships patrol those areas. Shouldn't we have a say in who uses those roads?" A Zephyrian delegate made a sound like wind through metal tubes. It was probably laughter. "Humans patrol space the way insects patrol a garden," he said. "Your presence is noted but not significant." Sarah felt her face get hot, but she stayed calm. "Human patrol ships have stopped 17 pirate attacks in that sector this year. We've rescued 43 vessels from various species when they had mechanical problems. How is that not significant?" The chamber was quiet again. This time the silence felt different. Some of the alien delegates were looking at each other instead of ignoring her. Sarah had touched on something important. Human rescue ships were famous throughout the galaxy. When disasters happened, when ships broke down in dangerous areas, when pirates attacked trade convoys, human vessels were always the first to respond. It was strange, really. Species that were supposedly more advanced than humans often seemed to have trouble with basic emergency response. Their ships were faster and stronger, but human crews were better at thinking quickly and taking risks to save lives. Councillor Thexara, an ancient ethereal whose crystal body glowed with soft purple light, spoke slowly. "The human rescue record is notable. Notable but irrelevant," Veltar said quickly. "We are discussing major trade policy, not rescue operations. but Sarah could see that something had changed in the room. Other delegates were whispering to each other. The Karathi representative was looking at his datapad, probably checking the rescue statistics. After the meeting, Sarah walked back toward the human quarters. She was tired and frustrated, but something felt different. For the first time in years, some of the other species had actually listened to her. A soft voice called her name. She turned to see Dr. Kethmore, a Karathi scientist she had worked with on a few research projects. His people looked like tall, thin humans with gray skin and large heads. "Ambassador Chen," he said quietly, "may I speak with you privately?" They found a small observation lounge that was empty. Kethmore looked around carefully before speaking. "Many of us have been watching," he said. "What your people do, how you help others even when you get nothing in return." Sarah was surprised. "I didn't know other species paid attention to that." "Oh, we pay attention," Kethmore said, "especially after what happened at the Proxima Station disaster." Sarah remembered that day well. A solar flare had damaged the main power systems at Proxima Station, home to over 2 million aliens from dozens of species. The Council's emergency response had been slow and confused. Different species argued about who was responsible for what, but human ships had arrived within hours. They brought power generators, medical supplies, and food. Human engineers worked for 3 days straight to fix the station's life support systems. They saved everyone. The Council barely mentioned the human response in their official report, Kethmore continued. But people remember. We remember who came to help when we needed it. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked. Kethmore was quiet for a moment. "Because things are changing. More species are starting to question the old ways, the category system, the idea that age equals wisdom." He handed her a small data device. "These are communication codes for other delegates who think like I do. We meet informally to discuss alternative approaches to galactic cooperation." Sarah looked at the device. "This could be dangerous for you. If the Council finds out..." "Yes," Kethmore agreed. "But some things are worth the risk. Your people have shown us that advancement isn't about how long you've been in space. It's about what you do when others need help." After Kethmore left, Sarah stood alone in the observation lounge looking out at the stars. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained order through fear and rigid rules. Species stayed in their assigned categories. Everyone knew their place. But Sarah could feel that something was changing. Small cracks were appearing in the foundation of the old system. And like all cracks, they would eventually grow larger. She touched the communication device on her wrist again. This time she called a secure line to Earth's government. "This is Ambassador Chen," she said when the connection opened. "I need to speak with the President. We may have an opportunity here, but we need to be ready to act quickly." Outside the window, alien ships continued their endless dance around Station Nexus. But Sarah was no longer watching them with frustration. For the first time in years, she was watching them with hope. The emergency alarm rang through Station Nexus at 3 a.m, station time. Sarah Chen woke up immediately, her years as a diplomat having trained her to respond quickly to crisis situations. The red lights flashing in her quarters told her this was not a drill. She grabbed her communication device and connected to the emergency network. The news was bad. Very bad. Kepler 442, a star system with 4 inhabited planets, was in trouble. The main star was collapsing faster than anyone had predicted. Solar storms and radiation were already making the outer planets dangerous to live on. Scientists estimated that all 4 planets would be uninhabitable within 2 weeks. More than 3 billion people lived in that system. Humans, Karathi, Tessarans, and Valdari. All of them needed to be evacuated immediately. Sarah quickly dressed and ran to the Council emergency chambers. When she arrived, she found chaos. Dozens of alien delegates were arguing loudly in their various languages. Holographic displays showed the situation in Kepler 442 getting worse by the hour. Councillor Veltar was shouting at a Tesseran representative. "Your ships cannot enter the evacuation zone without proper authorization from the Safety Committee." "But the Safety Committee won't meet until tomorrow," the Tesseran replied. "People will die waiting for authorization." Sarah looked at the main display screen. It showed the evacuation ships from various Council species sitting at safe distances from Kepler 442, waiting for permission to help. Meanwhile, the radiation levels in the system were rising every hour. "This is insane," she said, loud enough for others to hear. "People are dying while we argue about paperwork." Counselor Veltar turned toward her with angry eyes. Category 7 species do not speak in emergency sessions unless specifically asked. Then I'm asking, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Counselor Thexara, the ancient ethereal, floating into the chamber. Her crystal body was glowing brighter than usual, which meant she was either excited or angry. What do the humans suggest? Sarah was surprised but ready. Send the ships now. All of them. Figure out the bureaucratic details later. Every hour we wait, more people die. Impossible, Veltar said immediately. We must follow proper procedures. What if ships from different species interfere with each other? What if there are accidents? Who takes responsibility? I'll take responsibility, Sarah said. Send me the evacuation plans for each species. Human ships can coordinate the rescue efforts. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several delegates were shouting at once. Humans coordinate our ships? A Zephyrian delegate said with disbelief. Your people barely understand space navigation. Human ships are slow and primitive, added a Vardak military officer. They would only get in the way. Sarah felt her temper rising, but she forced herself to stay calm. Human ships may be slower, but human crews train for exactly this kind of emergency. We practice rescue operations constantly. Training is not the same as actual experience, Veltar said dismissively. You're right, Sarah replied. So let me tell you about our actual experience. In the last 5 years, human ships have responded to over 400 emergency calls. We've rescued more than 50,000 people from disasters. Our success rate is 97%. She paused and looked around the chamber. How many rescue operations have council ships completed in the same time period? The chamber became uncomfortably quiet. Everyone knew the answer. Council ships were designed for exploration, trade, and warfare. They were not built for rescue operations. When emergencies happened, they usually waited for specialized rescue vessels that took days to arrive. Dr. Kethmore, the Karathi scientist Sarah had spoken with earlier, stood up slowly. The human rescue statistics are correct, he said. I have verified them personally. Veltar looked angry. Even if that's true, we cannot ignore proper procedures. The Council has rules for emergency situations. The Council's rules are killing people, said another voice. This time it was Commander Zexhai of the Tesseran Union. My people are trapped on Kepler 442c. Every minute we waste in discussion is a minute closer to their deaths. Sarah made a decision. She activated her personal communicator and switched it to a frequency that could be heard throughout the chamber. This is Ambassador Chen, calling Captain Rodriguez of the UES Determination. Are you receiving? A scratchy voice came through the speakers. Loud and clear, Ambassador. We're about 6 hours out from Kepler 442. Got a full rescue fleet with us. Every alien in the chamber stared at Sarah. Captain, did you wait for Council authorization before heading to Kepler 442? Negative, ma'am. We left as soon as we got the distress signals. Figured we'd sort out the paperwork later. Can't help people if they're dead. Counselor Veltar was so angry his blue skin turned purple. This is completely against regulations. Human ships cannot enter an emergency zone without Council permission. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the speakers again. With respect, Counselor, we're already in the system. Starting evacuation of the outer colonies now. We've got 37 ships here, including cargo vessels, medical ships, and emergency transports. Sarah looked at the main display. It now showed human ships moving through the Kepler 442 system, approaching the planets closest to the unstable star. They were small compared to the massive Council vessels, but they were moving fast and working together. This is outrageous, Veltar shouted. Recall your ships immediately. Can't do that, sir, Captain Rodriguez replied calmly. We're getting evacuation requests from all 4 planets. Lot of scared people down there, including some Council citizens. The chamber fell silent. On the display screen, they could see human ships beginning to dock with space stations and planetary facilities. Small transport vessels were flying back and forth between the human ships and the planet surfaces. Commander Zexhai was watching his own people being rescued by human crews. His voice was quiet when he spoke. My government authorizes human ships to evacuate Tesseran citizens. Mine as well, said Dr. Kethmore. Korathi colonies are cleared to work with human rescue teams. Even some of the smaller species delegates were authorizing human ships to help their people. Veltar looked around the chamber with disbelief. You cannot do this. The council must vote on any major rescue operation. Then call a vote, Sarah said simply. Veltar realized he was trapped. If he called for a vote and lost, it would show that the council supported human actions. If he didn't call for a vote, he looked weak and indecisive. While Veltar hesitated, the rescue operation continued. The display screen showed human ships working with incredible efficiency. They had divided the system into sections, with each human ship responsible for a specific area. Larger ships served as mobile command centers, while smaller vessels did the actual evacuating. What impressed the watching aliens most was how human crews worked with evacuees from other species. Human medics were treating Karathi patients. Human engineers were helping Tesseran families load their belongings onto transport ships. Human pilots were flying through dangerous radiation zones to reach isolated settlements. Hours passed. The council chamber had become quieter as delegates watched the rescue operation unfold. Some aliens were making quiet calls to their home governments. Others were taking notes on human rescue procedures. Captain Rodriguez's voice came through the speakers again. Ambassador, we've got a problem. The radiation around Kepler 442d is getting worse faster than expected. The Valdari colony there has about 600 people who can't reach the evacuation ships. Sarah looked at the display. Kepler 442d was the closest planet to the unstable star. The radiation levels there would be lethal to most species within hours. What do you need, Captain? We've got one ship that can handle the radiation long enough to get those people out. But it's a one-way trip. The ship won't survive the return journey. The chamber was completely silent now. Everyone understood what Captain Rodriguez was saying. A human crew was volunteering to die to save 600 aliens. Understood, Captain. What ship? The U.S. Sacramento. Captain Williams and her crew of 43 volunteers. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. She knew Captain Williams personally. The woman had 3 children back on Earth. Tell Captain Williams. Tell her the galaxy won't forget. Will do, ma'am. Sacramento is beginning her final approach now. On the display screen, they watched a small human ship dive toward the most dangerous planet in the system. The radiation was so intense that the ship's hull began glowing red from the heat. But it kept flying, straight toward the Valdari colony. 20 minutes later, the Sacramento emerged from the planet's atmosphere. It was carrying 600 Valdari refugees, but the ship was clearly dying. Its engines were failing, and its hull was cracked in several places. The ship made it 3/4 of the way to the human rescue fleet before its engines gave out completely. But other human ships were already moving to intercept. They used emergency docking tubes to transfer the Valdari refugees to safety, even as the Sacramento broke apart around them. Captain Williams and her crew died saving 600 people they had never met. The council chamber was completely silent except for the quiet sound of several alien delegates crying. Finally, Councillor Thexara spoke. Her crystal voice was soft and sad. I move that the council formally recognize the human rescue operation in Kepler 442 and provide full support for the evacuation efforts. Seconded, said Commander Zexhai. Immediately. Thirded, said Dr. 3 days after the Kepler 442 rescue operation ended. Sarah Chen received a message that changed everything. The communication came on an encrypted channel that only the highest-level diplomats used. The sender was completely unexpected. Prime Crystalline Luxandra of the Ethereal Dominion wanted to meet with her privately. The Ethereals were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had helped create the Galactic Council 3,000 years ago. Their crystal bodies could live for tens of thousands of years, and they were considered the wisest species in known space. They were Category 1, the highest possible classification. No Ethereal Prime had ever requested a private meeting with a human diplomat. Sarah arrived at the designated meeting location, a small meditation chamber in the oldest section of Station Nexus. The room was dimly lit, with soft blue lights that didn't hurt the eyes. Prime Luxandra was already there, her crystal body floating slightly above the floor and glowing with gentle white light. Ambassador Chen, the ethereal said in her musical voice, thank you for coming. It's an honor, Prime Luxandra. Though I must admit I'm curious why you wanted to see me. The ancient being was quiet for a long moment. When ethereals thought deeply, their crystal bodies changed color slightly. Right now, Luxandra's body was shifting between white and pale blue. I have been alive for 37,000 years, she finally said. I have seen civilizations rise and fall. I helped design the classification system that governs our galaxy today. Sarah waited respectfully for her to continue. The system was created with good intentions. Luxandra continued. We believe that older species with more experience would naturally make better decisions. We thought that wisdom came with age and technological advancement. Many people still believe that, Sarah said carefully. Yes, they do. But I have been watching your species, Ambassador Chen. I've been watching what humans do when others are in danger, and I have realized something that troubles me deeply. The ethereal's body began glowing brighter. We created a system that rewards age and technology but ignores character. We measure advancement by how long a species has been in space, not by how they treat others. Sarah began to understand where this conversation was going. 3 days ago, Luxandra continued, I watched human beings sacrifice their lives to save strangers. Not because they were ordered to, not because they expected rewards, but because it was the right thing to do. And I realized that my species, despite our great age and wisdom, would not have done the same. Prime Luxandra, surely you don't mean that. Oh, but I do. The ethereal's voice was sad. We ethereals are very good at thinking and planning and discussing. But when action is required, when sacrifice is needed, we hesitate. We calculate risks and benefits. We consider consequences. She paused, her crystal body now glowing with pale golden light. Humans simply act. When you see suffering, you try to stop it. When you see injustice, you fight it. When you see people in danger, you help them. These are not the actions of a primitive species, Ambassador. These are the actions of a truly advanced civilization. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. What are you saying, Prime? I am saying that the ethereal dominion is formally withdrawing from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. Sarah's mouth fell open. In 3,000 years, no Category 1 species had ever left the Council. Furthermore, Luxandra continued, we are announcing our intention to form new alliances based on character, rather than classification. We would be honored to begin these alliances with humanity. Before Sarah could respond, Luxandra handed her a crystal data storage device. This contains our formal withdrawal statement. It also contains detailed information about Council military capabilities, secret projects, and internal political divisions, information that may be useful in the days to come. Why are you giving me this? Because change is coming, Ambassador Chen. The old system is failing. Other species are watching what happened at Kepler 442. They are asking themselves hard questions about the Council's leadership, and some of them are reaching the same conclusions that we have. Sarah looked at the crystal device in her hands. It felt warm, like it was alive. What happens now? She asked. Now we see if courage is contagious, Luxandra replied. The ethereal withdrawal announcement hit the Galactic News Network 6 hours later. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Council supporters called it treachery and madness, but others began asking different questions. If the ethereals, the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy, were leaving the Council, what did that say about the Council itself? Sarah was in her office when the second withdrawal announcement came. This time it was the Karathi Collective. Dr. Kethmore appeared on her communication screen looking nervous but determined. The Collective Council has voted, he said. We are formally withdrawing from the Galactic Council. We believe it is time for a new approach to galactic cooperation. Before Sarah could congratulate him, another call came in. Then another. And another. The Tesseran Union announced their withdrawal 2 hours after the Karathi. Commander Zexhai's statement was simple and direct. We choose to align ourselves with those who act to save lives, not those who debate while people die. By the end of the day, 7 species had announced their withdrawal from the Galactic Council. By the end of the week, the number had grown to 23, but the most shocking withdrawal came from an unexpected source. The hegemony of Vardak had been the Council's military enforcers for over 1,000 years. They were Category 2, proud warriors who had never questioned the system they served, until now. The announcement came from General Krathvek, the hegemony's military leader. His message was broadcast across the galaxy. The hegemony has served the Council faithfully for generations. We believed we were protecting galactic civilization. But recent events have forced us to examine our role more carefully. The general's scarred face filled the screen. Behind him stood dozens of younger Vardak officers. We have spent centuries enforcing a system that calls species primitive, based on their age, not their actions. We have prevented lower category species from accessing technology and resources that could have saved lives. We have been the sword of an unjust system. He paused, his red eyes looking directly at the camera. No more. The hegemony is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. We will use our strength to protect those who cannot protect themselves, not to enforce the will of those who value tradition over justice. The withdrawal announcements created chaos throughout Council space. Some species remained loyal to the old system, but they were increasingly outnumbered. Younger members of traditional Council species began demanding that their governments reconsider their positions. Sarah found herself at the center of a diplomatic storm. Representatives from dozens of species were requesting meetings with her. Some wanted to join the growing alliance. Others wanted to understand what humans planned to do with their new influence. The answer to that question came during an emergency session that Sarah called at Station Nexus. The main assembly hall was packed with delegates from both Council and non-Council species. Many of them had never sat in the same room together before. Sarah stood at the center of the circular chamber, looking up at the hundreds of alien faces watching her. 3 weeks ago, she began, a star began to die. In response, some people argued about procedures while others acted to save lives. The difference between those two approaches represents the choice we all face today. She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. About 40% of known space was now controlled by species that had left the Council. We can continue with the old system, Sarah continued, where age and technology determine worth, where some species are considered superior to others based on arbitrary classifications, where bureaucracy is more important than saving lives. She paused and looked around the chamber. Or we can try something new, a system where species are judged by their actions, not their age, where cooperation replaces competition, where the measure of advancement is not how powerful you are, but how much you help others. A Zephyrian delegate stood up. And who would lead this new system? Humans? Sarah shook her head. No one would lead it. That's the point. The Council failed because it concentrated power in the hands of a few species. Any new system must distribute power equally among all participants. Dr. Kethmore raised his hand. How would decisions be made without central leadership? The same way they were made during the Kepler 442 rescue, Sarah replied. Through voluntary cooperation. Species working together because they want to, not because they're forced to. She activated another display, this one showing a proposed structure for the new alliance. We call it the cooperative. Every species gets one vote, regardless of their technology level or how long they've been in space. Decisions are made by consensus when possible, by majority vote when necessary. No species is considered superior to another. Prime Luxandra's voice echoed through the chamber. The ethereal dominion supports this proposal. The War Council met in the deepest, most secure chamber of Station Nexus. Councillor Veltar stood at the head of a massive table, his blue skin pale with stress. Around him sat the representatives of the remaining Council species, their faces grim in the dim lighting. 47 species have now abandoned the Council, Veltar announced, his voice tight with anger. 47! In 3 weeks we have lost nearly half of our membership. Councillor Zephrix, a tall insectoid creature with metallic green skin, clicked his mandibles nervously. The economic impact is severe. Trade routes are being disrupted. Resource agreements are being cancelled. Our currency is losing value. The military situation is worse, added General Thokmar of the Dominion Guard. The Vardak defection cost us our primary enforcement fleet. Without them, we have limited ability to project power beyond the core systems. Veltar slammed his four-fingered hand on the table. How did this happen? How did a Category 7 species cause the collapse of a 3,000-year-old galactic government? The chamber was silent for a moment. None of them wanted to admit the truth, that the Council's rigid hierarchy had been failing for decades, and the human rescue operation had simply been the catalyst that brought everything crashing down. It's not just the humans, said Councillor Yathana, a pale humanoid with large black eyes. Our own young people are questioning the system. I have reports of protests on 17 worlds. They're demanding to know why we classify species by age instead of character. Character, Veltar spat, as if these short-lived primitives understand anything about character. They've existed for a few thousand years and they think they know better than civilizations that have endured for millions. Perhaps they do, said a quiet voice from the shadows. Everyone turned to see Counselor Mexthera, an ancient void walker whose species rarely spoke in council sessions. Her dark ethereal form seemed to absorb light from the room. Mexthera, Veltar said with surprise. You haven't spoken in council for over a century. I have been observing, the void walker replied, her voice like whispers in empty space, watching the patterns of behavior across the species. The humans may be young, but their actions during the Kepler crisis revealed something important. Which is? Veltar asked impatiently. That advancement is not measured in years or technology. It is measured in the willingness to sacrifice for others. Veltar's skin darkened with rage. Not you too, Mexthera. Are you also planning to abandon the council? I am planning to survive, the Void Walker replied simply. The old order is dying. We can either adapt or be swept away by the changes. No, Veltar shouted, his voice echoing through the chamber. We are not abandoning 3,000 years of civilization because some primitives got lucky in a rescue operation. The council will endure. It must endure. He activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy divided into two regions, council space and cooperative space. We still control the core systems, he continued, the richest, most developed worlds in the galaxy. We have the most advanced technology, the strongest remaining military forces, and the support of the oldest civilizations. General Thokmar leaned forward. What are you proposing, Counselor? We make an example, Veltar said, his eyes gleaming with dangerous intensity. We show the galaxy what happens when primitive species overstep their bounds. We demonstrate that the Council's authority is not to be challenged. You're talking about military action, Counselor Yathana said with alarm, against civilian populations? I'm talking about restoring order, Veltar replied. The humans have corrupted dozens of species with their chaotic philosophy. They've convinced these species to abandon the natural order of things. It's time to remind everyone why the Council exists. Mexthera's form seemed to grow darker. And what target would you choose for this demonstration? Veltar smiled coldly and pointed to a location on the holographic map. The Joint Research Station at Kepler 438. It's a collaboration between humans and Karathi, working on some kind of faster-than-light communication technology. It's a perfect symbol of the dangerous mixing of primitive and advanced sciences. That station has no military defenses, General Thokmar pointed out. It's purely a research facility. Exactly, Veltar said. Easy to destroy, maximum symbolic impact. We use the quantum disruptors to eliminate the station completely. No survivors, no evidence, no witnesses. The message will be clear. Abandon the council and face the consequences. The chamber fell silent. Several counselors looked uncomfortable with the proposal, but none spoke up against it. All in favor? Veltar asked. Slowly, reluctantly, most of the remaining counselors raised their hands. Only Mexthera abstained. The attack is authorized, Veltar announced. General Thokmar, prepare the quantum disruptor ships. I want that station destroyed within 12 hours. Unknown to the council, Mexthera had been broadcasting the entire meeting on an encrypted channel. In the cooperative territories, leaders were receiving the warning in real time. Dr. Kethmore was in his laboratory on the Joint Research Station when the emergency call came through. Sarah Chen's face appeared on his communication screen, her expression urgent. Kethmore, you need to evacuate the station immediately. The council is planning to attack you with quantum disruptors. The Karathi scientist felt his blood turn cold. Quantum disruptors were terrible weapons that could tear apart matter at the subatomic level. Nothing survived a quantum disruptor attack. How long do we have? He asked, already moving toward the emergency controls. Less than 12 hours. Maybe less. Kethmore began activating the evacuation protocols. Throughout the station, alarms began sounding. The 1,500 researchers and support staff, humans, Karathi, and a few other species, began moving toward the escape pods and emergency shuttles. Sarah, Kethmore said as he worked, we've made a breakthrough here. The faster-than-light communication system is almost complete. If we can finish it, we can coordinate cooperative forces across the galaxy instantly. How long would you need? 6 hours. Maybe 7. Sarah was quiet for a moment. The attack ships will arrive before then. Then we'll have to work faster, Kethmore said grimly. What happened next would be remembered as one of the most remarkable acts of cooperation in galactic history. When news of the planned attack spread through cooperative space, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Human ships began arriving at the research station within 3 hours. But they weren't warships. They were cargo vessels, passenger transports, and private ships volunteering to help with the evacuation. Captain Rodriguez, who had led the Kepler 442 rescue, brought his entire fleet. "Nobody destroys a research station on my watch," he said simply. The Tesseran Union sent their fastest ships to help transport evacuees. The Ethereals provided advanced shielding technology. Even former Council species began arriving to help defend the station. But the most surprising arrival was a small fleet of Vardak warships, led by General Krathvek himself. "General," Sarah said when he contacted the station, "this isn't your fight. You've already done enough by leaving the Council." "It is exactly our fight," the scarred warrior replied. "For too long, the Vardak have been the sword that enforced injustice. Today we choose to be the shield that protects the innocent." As the evacuation continued, Dr. Kethamore and his team worked frantically to complete their communication device. The irony was not lost on anyone. They were racing to create a technology that would help coordinate peaceful cooperation while under attack by those who preferred violent domination. The Council attack fleet arrived exactly on schedule. 12 massive ships armed with quantum disruptors, commanded by Admiral Zokthis, one of the most ruthless military officers in Council space. What they found waiting for them was a surprise. Over 200 ships from dozens of species surrounded the research station. They were not arranged in any formal military formation. Instead, they formed overlapping protective shells around the station, with the largest ships on the outside and smaller vessels closer in. "This is Admiral Zokthis of the Council Defense Fleet," came the broadcast. "You are interfering with a lawful military operation. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Captain Rodriguez responded for the defending fleet. "This is Captain Rodriguez speaking for the Cooperative Defense Force. The research station contains civilian scientists from multiple species. We will not allow you to harm them." "You cannot stop quantum disruptors with your primitive ships," the Admiral replied. "Stand down or share their fate." "Then we'll share their fate," Rodriguez said simply. The Admiral gave the order to fire. The quantum disruptors were indeed terrible weapons. The first salvo destroyed 6 cooperative ships instantly, their matter simply ceasing to exist. But the defenders did not retreat. Instead, they moved closer together, overlapping their shields and creating an interlocking defensive network. The second salvo met a wall of concentrated shield energy and dispersed harmlessly into space. "Impossible," Admiral Zokthis muttered. "Individual shields cannot stop quantum disruptors. Apparently, they can when there are enough of them working together," his tactical officer replied with grudging admiration. The battle continued for 4 hours. The Council ships were more powerful individually, but the cooperative defenders had numbers and determination. More importantly, they had something the Council forces lacked. They were fighting to protect innocent lives, not to enforce political authority. Just 6 months had passed since the failed attack on research station Kepler 438. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of New Hope Station, looking out at something that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. Before her floated the largest gathering of ships in galactic history. Vessels from over 200 species filled the space around the massive new station, their diverse designs creating a beautiful chaos of colors, shapes, and sizes. The smallest ships were human shuttles no bigger than buses. The largest were ethereal crystal cities that housed millions of beings. Today was the opening ceremony of the first cooperative assembly, and Sarah could hardly believe how much had changed. New Hope Station had been built in just 4 months through the combined efforts of dozens of species. Human engineers had designed the basic structure. Karathi biotechnology had created the living support systems. Tesseran architects had planned the internal spaces. Ethereal crystal workers had grown the beautiful spires that reached out like arms to welcome visitors. Even former Council enforcers like the Vardak had contributed, providing advanced defensive systems to protect the station from any future attacks. The station was enormous, bigger than any structure ever built in space. But unlike the cold, sterile halls of Station Nexus, New Hope felt warm and alive. The corridors were filled with plants from 100 worlds. Art from dozens of cultures decorated the walls. Music from countless traditions played softly in the background. Most importantly, the station had no hierarchy of seating or restricted areas. Every species, from the ancient ethereals to newly spacefaring civilizations that had only recently been discovered, had equal access to every part of the station. Sarah made her way to the Grand Assembly Hall, where representatives from the cooperative species were gathering for their first formal meeting. The hall was a marvel of engineering and art, a vast spherical chamber where delegates could sit on any surface, with gravity fields that allowed them to choose their own orientation. As Sarah entered the hall, she saw delegates taking their seats on the walls, the ceiling, and even floating in the center of the chamber. Some species were more comfortable hanging upside down. Others preferred to float in zero gravity. The human delegation had chosen traditional-style seating on what most people would consider the floor. The sight of so many different life forms working together peacefully brought tears to Sarah's eyes. A year ago, most of these species had never even met each other, kept apart by the Council's rigid classification system. Dr. Kethmore, now serving as the Karathi representative, floated over to where the human delegation was sitting. His people had evolved in low gravity, so they were more comfortable in the weightless sections of the chamber. Ambassador Chen, he said with a smile. Or should I say Director Chen now? Sarah had been elected as the first Director of Interspecies Relations for the Cooperative, a position that rotated between species every 2 years. It was both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. Just Sarah is fine, she replied. Are you nervous about today? Terrified, Kethmore admitted. For 3,000 years, my people followed orders from the Council. Now we have to make decisions for ourselves. We'll make them together, Sarah assured him. That's the point. Prime Luxandra's crystal form approached them, floating gracefully through the air. The ancient ethereal had become one of the cooperative's strongest supporters, using her vast knowledge to help design their new governmental structure. Director Chen, she said in her musical voice, the delegates are ready to begin. Sarah looked around the chamber one more time. Representatives from over 200 species were present, more diversity than had ever been gathered in one place. She spotted Tesseran diplomats sharing space with former council loyalists who had only recently joined the cooperative. Vardic warriors sat peacefully next to tiny, delicate beings whose names she was still learning. In the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed the current state of the galaxy. The cooperative now controlled nearly 70% of known space. The old Galactic Council still existed, but it was reduced to just 37 species clustered around the core systems. Sarah activated her communicator, and her voice echoed throughout the massive chamber. Friends, colleagues, fellow beings of the galaxy, she began. 6 months ago we were enemies, strangers, and subjects of a system that divided us by arbitrary classifications. Today we gather as equals, united by our shared belief that cooperation is stronger than domination. The chamber fell silent as delegates listened to her words. Some were translating for their companions. Others were recording the moment for their homeworlds. The cooperative was born from a simple idea, Sarah continued, that the worth of a species should be measured not by their age or their technology, but by their willingness to help others. That advancement means lifting everyone up, not standing on others to reach greater heights. She paused and looked around the chamber at the incredible diversity of faces watching her. Today we make that idea real. Today we establish the first truly democratic galactic government in history, not ruled by the strongest or the oldest, but guided by the collective wisdom of all species working together. A Tesseran delegate raised one of his 4 arms. Director Chen, what about the remaining council species? Do we exclude them the way they excluded us? Sarah shook her head. The cooperative's doors remain open to any species that accepts our principles of equality and mutual aid. We will not create a new hierarchy to replace the old one. Even after they attacked us? Asked a Vardic general, his scarred face skeptical. Especially after they attacked us, Sarah replied. We must prove that our way is better than theirs. Violence and exclusion are tools of the old system. We choose a different path. Prime Luxandra spoke up, her crystal voice carrying clearly through the chamber. The director speaks wisdom. I have lived for 37,000 years, and I have seen what happens when civilizations choose fear over hope. The cooperative represents something new in galactic history, a government based on consent rather than conquest. Dr. Kethmore added his support. My people have analyzed the economic data. Cooperative worlds are already showing increased prosperity, innovation, and happiness compared to remaining council systems. Cooperation is not just morally superior, it's practically superior. The formal establishment of the cooperative government took most of the day. Unlike the rigid hierarchy of the old council, the new system was designed to be flexible and responsive. Decisions would be made by consensus when possible, by majority vote when necessary, and by rotating councils when expertise was required. Every species had one vote in the General Assembly, regardless of their size, age, or technological level. Specialized committees would handle specific issues like trade, defense, and scientific research, with membership rotating to ensure that all species had opportunities to contribute their expertise. Most importantly, the new government had no permanent leaders. The position of director would rotate between species every 2 years, preventing any one group from accumulating too much power. As the formal ceremonies concluded, Sarah found herself on the observation deck again, this time joined by representatives from dozens of species. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the ships of the cooperative fleet move through space around New Hope Station. The sight was beautiful and hopeful, but Sarah knew their work was far from finished. The remaining council species were still dangerous, and there were rumors of internal conflicts within cooperative space as different species adjusted to working as equals. Her thoughts were interrupted by an urgent communication from Captain Rodriguez, who was patrolling the border regions between cooperative and council space. Director Chen. His voice crackled through the speakers. We've got an interesting situation out here. A council patrol ship is requesting asylum. Says they want to join the cooperative. Sarah exchanged glances with the other delegates. What species, Captain? Zephyrian. Ironically, it's commanded by Councillor Veltar's own nephew. Says he's disgusted by what the council has become. This was significant news. The Zephyrians had been among the strongest supporters of the old system. If even they were beginning to defect, it meant the council's support was crumbling faster than anyone had expected. Grant them asylum, Captain, Sarah decided. But follow standard protocols, full debriefing and voluntary integration processes. Understood, ma'am. Rodriguez out. Prime Luxandra moved closer to Sarah. Change is accelerating, the ethereal observed. The old order is collapsing faster than we anticipated. Is that good or bad? Sarah asked. Both, Luxandra replied thoughtfully. Rapid change creates opportunities, but it also creates instability. We must be prepared for anything. As if summoned by her words, another urgent communication came through. This time it was from deep space, near the old council core systems. The message was from Councillor Mex Thara, the Voidwalker who had been secretly helping the cooperative for months. Cooperative leadership? Her whispered voice came through the speakers. Veltar is planning something desperate. He's accessing weapons that have been sealed away for thousands of years.